Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It's Thursday, March 10th. We're following several fast-moving developments out of Ukraine this morning. A horrific scene after Russia attacked a maternity hospital in the city of Mariupol. Images of pregnant women being carried out on stretchers, flying debris, and a crater some 30 feet deep. The bombing sparking international condemnation that Russia is still targeting civilians. After meeting with Ukraine's foreign minister in Turkey this morning, Russia's Sergei Lavrov falsely claimed there were no patients inside the hospital when it was attacked. The Ukrainian diplomat said his request for 24-hour ceasefire was denied and that Russia conveyed the attacks will continue until its demands are met. Plus, new concerns this morning that Russia could be laying the groundwork to use biological or chemical weapons, and what could be a looming crisis at the Chernobyl nuclear plant. The power is still out, and so far no signs that the Russians who now occupy the plant are trying to restore it. And the battle over how to get fighter jets to Ukraine gets complicated as the country's president jabs the U.S. for denying a plan by Poland. All of this as the war enters Day 15. With us, we have U.S. Special Correspondent for BBC, Katty Kay, columnist and associate editor for The Washington Post, David Ignatius, and former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, retired four-star Navy Admiral James Stavridis. He is Chief International Security and Diplomacy Analyst for NBC News and MSNBC.
So, Willie, a lot of horrid news coming out yesterday for the people of Ukraine. Another day of bad news for the Russian military and just their complete ineptness on the battlefield. Just to put a little bit of context to all of this bad news, you did have a meeting between two foreign ministers this morning. It didn't end well, but the question is, what did they say behind closed doors during the meeting? You have the Russians and Zelensky now seeming to sort of circle each other, the broad outlines of a deal that could happen. Ukraine declaring its neutrality and Russia getting Crimea and these two breakaway Russian republics. Again, it hasn't happened, but we're now starting to hear talks of that. We're also, of course, having two foreign ministers getting together instead of the joke of a conference we saw last week in the first week of the war.
Yeah, this is the highest level meeting between the two sides. The Ukrainian delegation said not much came out of it, but it was a start that they met together, though Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, as Mika pointed out, waved off concerns about the attack on a hospital, on a maternity hospital, a children's hospital, and said, well, they were housing insurgents in there, there were no patients there. That's just not true. So it's hard to negotiate across from a table from someone who is, this is not an errant missile. This is a target on a hospital. The World Health Organization says 18 hospitals, healthcare worker centers, ambulances have been targeted in this war. So you combine the aptitude that you're talking about, Joe, with war crimes, and that's a tough country to negotiate with in good faith.
That is a tough country to negotiate with in good faith. Obviously, war crimes being committed by the day, David Ignatius, and still Ukraine negotiating with Russia, and the two sides actually trying to figure out how to get to a place where, one, lives can be saved in Ukraine, and two, Vladimir Putin's third-rate army will cease to be exposed for just the absolute debacle that it is.
This is a war that's painful for both sides, where both sides do have reason to negotiate. Russia has reason to negotiate because its forces increasingly are walking into what would be a long-term trap. It will take them years to get out of Ukraine if they persist. They do not have the forces to occupy a country whose people clearly detest them. Ukraine, their cities, their citizens are getting pounded. These horrible scenes. I wrote this morning, it's like watching a child being strangled to see these scenes appear.
You also
Ukraine
wrote this morning that the idea of sending jets that won't make a big difference in the outcome of this battle, that sending jets the wrong thing to do, that cool heads must prevail.
So, Joe, as we know, we're on the edge of what could be a nuclear confrontation. If Russia chooses to escalate into that space.
You also wrote this morning, more dangerous than the Cuban Missile Crisis right now.
So you think of the Cuban Missile Crisis, it was a negotiation, it was highly dangerous, but there wasn't a war going on between the two sides.
Right.
There is now. And that's why it's so, it wasn't conducted under the light of, in CNN, MSNBC world.
Right.
Kennedy could meet with his advisors, think carefully, and find a way out of it. We're in a different and perhaps more dangerous situation. That's why I take the reports of diplomatic negotiations that we've been discussing this morning seriously. They haven't gone anywhere yet. But if there's a diplomatic exit to this crisis is certainly in everyone's interest, the Ukrainians.
And other countries maybe getting involved?
So Israel, interestingly, Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett met Saturday in Moscow with President Putin. That's an important relationship, and if there's a pathway towards more serious negotiations, maybe that it will be a productive
one. Can only hope. Katty Kay, as David pointed out, when you look at the realities of this, as he said, both sides have reason to negotiate. I think the question on everyone's minds is, does Putin understand that? Or is he just driving forward no matter what? And if one thing doesn't work, he'll go for another. I'm thinking nuclear power plants. I'm thinking chemical weapons.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.